But I would like to emphasize another aspect of what happened at that time, starting with the Asian financial crisis and directly linked to this notion of a savings glut. And that was an extraordinary rise in the current account surpluses, which is, of course, the capital exports of emerging countries, and above all, China and East Asia and the OPEC countries when the oil prices started to rise. These surpluses increased roughly 6 times relative to world GDP between 1997 and 2006. And it so happens, and it is a really extraordinarily neat story, it is almost unbelievably neat, so it makes one feel suspicious about it. These entire surpluses were absorbed, along with the surpluses of the old industrial surplus countries, basically Germany and Japan, were absorbed entirely by 2 groups of countries. The first group was the US, which absorbed 70% of them, and the other group was peripheral Europe. Peripheral Europe was West Europe, Ireland and the UK, Southern Europe, you know who they are, and Central and Eastern Europe. And the countries that absorb these inflows have something in common. Every last one of them is now in financial crisis. Every last one of them is now in financial crisis because they were incapable of using these very large capital inflows in a sensible and efficient manner. And the last thing I want to say about this shift and how it has affected us was, of course, this huge rise in the capital outflow from emerging countries was not simply the result, or not even mainly the result, of market processes. They were a result of government decisions. And the best way those decisions can be measured by is in the accumulation of foreign currency reserves, which are, of course, official outflows of capital. And between 1999 and today, the world's official stock of foreign currency reserves, all of the increase, with a tiny exception for Japan coming in emerging countries, has risen from just over $1 trillion to over $10 trillion. And these capital outflows have gone predominantly to the developed world and, of course, quite particularly to the United States. If you look at it in the form of the flow of funds associated with this, by the way, you will find that the deficits with a counterpart of these external capital flows into the US occurred entirely in the US household sector and the US government sector. There's no surprise there either. Now, in my view, these were the macroeconomic preconditions for or triggers for the crisis. This doesn't, of course, mean that in any way that the severity of the crisis and its nature is not related to how the financial sector performed and other governmental programs, failures of regulation, and so on. I'm not going to go into all of that. But these were, in my view, the macroeconomic conditions for what was quite simply the biggest financial meltdown the world, I think, has ever seen. Not the biggest economic crisis, but the biggest financial meltdown. A time when essentially the core financial system in the end of 2008 ceased to exist.